Welcome to The Debate. Today we're wrestling with a really provocative idea from the source material, this deep structural parallel between ancient spiritual disruptions and modern technical malfunctions. We're essentially connecting the poltergeist to the digital glitch.
It's a fascinating convergence, isn't it? It suggests that these seemingly random, disruptive failures we all experience, whether it's a chair flying across the room in the 19th century or a total system crash today, might actually share a single non-material cause.
Exactly. And that brings us to our central question. Where is the true origin of these anomalies? Are these disturbances in reality fundamentally caused by the, let's say, intrusion of external non-physical energies, astral or psychic forces, or are they just intrinsic emergent failures, necessary mutations that arise naturally from within complex systems?
And I'll be making the case that these disruptions are in fact caused by external, invisible forces impacting our material systems. I'm arguing for the intrusion thesis.
And I will be arguing the opposite, that these phenomena are inherent, necessary products of a system's own internal complexity and its drive to evolve. The emergence thesis. So my position really starts with complexity theory and biosemiotics. The material, I think, clearly demonstrates that these disturbances are fundamentally internal to the system. They come from the sheer complexity and the evolutionary pressures inside any self-organizing entity. So we have to see these things not as alien intrusions, but as necessary alien failings. That's a concept from systems biology. Rosen and Ayala talk about it. And these failings are absolutely essential because they expose the system's vulnerabilities and its limits, and that's what drives it to adapt. Just consider the idea of biosemiotic hyperplasia. It's this idea of an excessive proliferation and mutation of signs and meaning, which Satori describes.
When signs just multiply without any bounds, they generate this unpredictable new language, the so-called xenopoem. And this is really analogous to genetic mutation, like horizontal gene transfer in biology. It drives innovation. So as systems get more complex, perfect predictability just becomes impossible. They operate, as Kaufman famously put it, at the edge of chaos. The glitch, the poltergeist. It's simply the spontaneous generation of novelty. It's the system finding its next evolutionary step through its own internal failure.
Okay, I see why you're emphasizing the internal complexity, I do. But that focus, it seems to me, risks ignoring the persistent, non-physical signature that really defines these events. The fact that the phenomena of poltergeists in the past and glitches today, that they look and feel so fundamentally similar. Well, that suggests a common root that is actually independent of the system's complexity. It points directly to the primacy of the unseen, and theosophical thought gives us the grounding here. Thinkers like Blavatsky and Besant, they asserted that physical reality isn't the end-all be-all, it's temporary, it's largely illusory. It's just a manifestation of higher spiritual forces. And therefore, these disturbances are caused by the interference of non-physical energy, psychic emanations, spiritual forces, call it what you will, bleeding into the material plane. This whole concept is modernized by astropunk philosophy, especially by writers like Blackwood and Sky, who see glitches as the digital age's version of thin places, ruptures in the dimensional fabric where astral energy leaks into the digital world. So a glitch isn't a bug. It's an astral marker, evidence that the boundary between dimensions is porous. The disruption originates externally, and it just finds the most responsive medium, whether that's a nervous person or a fragile computer server, to manifest itself. I just fundamentally disagree that changing the word from poltergeist to glitch changes the cause. It's the same basic disturbance, astral interference, as Sky argues. The phenomena are physical disruptions that originate from a higher, unseen source. Besant explained this perfectly. She said disturbances, like poltergeists, were caused by the overflow of uncontrolled psychic energy. And crucially, this energy is non-material.
It's external to the orderly machine it affects. Our world of matter is constantly, if subtly, being influenced by these invisible currents from higher, less stable planes.
Wow. I'll grant you the compelling historical continuity. I have to challenge the premise of an external origin. Just look at how the system itself reacts. If we turn to Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis, the Earth is presented as this vast, self-regulating organism. Poltergeists and glitches, in that framework, they just reflect the immense strain on the system's internal balance. This is an internal destabilization. Lovelock specifically warned that our assertive, sort of self-serving human actions, they destabilize Gaia's feedback loops. They push the planet toward these thresholds of nonlinear change. The disturbance isn't caused by a force entering the system from outside. It's the internal consequence of pushing that existing complex system out of balance. When we misunderstand the system's complexity, an epistemological failure, really, the chaos that results gets interpreted as an external attack. But it's just the system running a kind of planetary stress test on itself. The chaos is generated by the stress we place on it.
But the energy for that stress test has to come from somewhere. The theosophical view is pretty clear that the physical world is just a reflection of the spiritual plane. So the disruption is simply one plane impacting the other. It's a structural influence. The boundary between them is just intrinsically thin, and that allows energies from unseen worlds to break through. And another thing, if the energy were purely endogenous, if it came entirely from the system's own stress response, then the manifestation should be purely mechanistic, right? But both poltergeists and glitches, they often display this characteristic of intelligent, almost purposeful chaos, often linked to emotional states. And that suggests the energy source itself is fundamentally non-physical, and it needs that dimensional boundary to rupture to express itself materially.
And this is precisely where the role of biological systems becomes so critical. Are they the source of this energy and meaning, or are they merely the amplifier of some external noise? I mean, computational biology strongly supports the generation argument. Drew Endy said that biological systems are inherently semiotic. They rely on molecular codes that generate and transmit meaning. This proliferation of signs, biosemiotic hyperplasia, is the instability. It's not just a response to it. Yeah, and Robert Rosen's work confirms this. Biological behavior can't be reduced to just its components. Life is a dynamic, creative entity. The human system generates its own complex, necessary failures. It creates the xenopoem, this new language, as a product of its own stress and creativity. We are the ones generating the semiotic failures, and they are essential for evolution. We're actively exploring what Kaufman called the adjacent possible, the set of all new forms a system can spontaneously create. Life doesn't wait for outside noise. It bubbles forth with its own disruptions.
That's a very compelling argument about inherent semiotics, but I think you're confusing the medium with the message. We're not denying the biological system's complexity, not at all. We are questioning the origin of the disruptive force that makes the system express that complexity through failure. The biological function, I would argue, acts specifically as a bridge, or a lens. Dr. Markova's work on biofields, I think, provides the key insight here. The biofield, this subtle electromagnetic field generated by all living things, is a responsive system. It resonates with external astral energies. So the human nervous system, when it's destabilized by stress, becomes a critical conduit. It amplifies these pre-existing non-material disturbances into the physical or the digital world. The energy is external. The human just provides the frequency matching to let it through.
But then, if the energy is external and it's constantly present on this astral plane, why are these disturbances so sporadic? Why do they seem to require a human conduit, the biofield? If it's just pure intrusion, it should be random and everywhere. The fact that these phenomena are so highly correlated with localized, heightened stress, or the presence of a specific sensitive person, well, that suggests the energy is deeply localized and endogenous. It originates within that stressed human system, not just passing through it.
Blackwood actually addresses that directly. He argues that glitches are shaped by the psychic energies of those who interact with the system. The biofield is the critical junction where the astral plane intersects with digital systems. So we're not saying the astral energy is constantly bombarding us. We're saying the human biofield acts as an unstable gateway. When the system is stressed, the gateway opens and the external astral current flows through the human, manifesting as disruption. The human isn't the power source. They're the faulty switch.
Okay, let's look at the ultimate purpose of this disruption then.
If the system is constantly failing and evolving, then disruption is inherently useful, right? Rosen said the study of failure is as critical to understanding life as the study of success. So, from an emergent standpoint, failure exposes vulnerabilities that are necessary for growth. The disruption is therefore purposeful. It's an evolutionary mechanism.
That treats the disruption as a mere utility. And I think that misses the point entirely. The phenomena are fundamentally moments of revelation. The veil between the material and the astral is lifted. They offer, as Sky puts it, clues to the existence of other dimensions. Their function isn't primarily to generate new biological language or new code. It's to reveal a hidden reality that is always present but usually just obscured. Astral punk suggests that when that boundary between worlds gets thin, which happens when a massive flow of energy mediated by a stressed human occurs, the astral realm literally touches the physical world, and it leaves behind an imprint, the glitch. This is about discovery. It's about exposure to unseen influencing forces. The defining characteristic is that moment of truth, the revelation of a multi-layered reality, not whatever adaptive benefit the system might get out of it later on.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because it implies a passive system that's just waiting around for a revelation. Evolutionary theory holds that the system is constantly adapting, constantly reaching. Woevers argue that evolution isn't just tinkering, it's creating entirely new architectures of life. Glitches and semiotic failures are the system's way of forcing innovation. When the system tries to integrate too much information or operate under immense stress, the failure that results is really the only possible path toward a new equilibrium. If the system were perfectly stable, it would just stagnate. The dynamic, unpredictable nature of life itself generates these anomalies as it seeks new forms of order. The fact that we can trace the xenopoem, this new language, back to moments of semiotic failure, well, that proves that the primary purpose is evolutionary utility, even if it feels chaotic in the moment. The disruption is simply the system's necessary cost of exploring the adjacent possible.
But even if we grant the evolutionary benefit, the trigger still matters. Sky argues that whether we call it a glitch or a poltergeist, it is the same basic disturbance, an interference between the worlds we can see and those we cannot. The focus remains on the visible system being challenged by invisible, higher dimensional forces. The evolutionary response you're talking about is just the biological system's adaptation to that external pressure. I mean, think about it. If we debug a computer glitch, we look for algorithmic flaws. But if the glitch is an astral marker, then true debugging has to fail, because the root cause is non-material. So the very existence of the glitch challenges the materialist internal system explanation of reality. It forces us to acknowledge a dimension of influence beyond the measurable components of the system.
The complexity framework accounts for the unmeasurable perfectly well, actually, but it defines it as emergent complexity, not intrusion. When we talk about Lovelock's Gaia, the planet's ability to self-regulate is a massive, complex, emergent property that we can't measure just by summing up its parts. The instability, the poltergeist, is simply the nonlinear manifestation of that emergent complexity breaking down under stress. The system generates its own chaos. So my stance remains that the complexity and proliferation of signs in our technological and biological world means that disruptions are inherent to life. Glitches and poltergeists reflect the limits and the necessary failings of self-organizing systems as they evolve. The dynamic, unpredictable nature of life itself generates these anomalies as it seeks new forms of order and defines its own reality through failure.
And my position holds that whether they're technical or physical, these disturbances signal a constant and active connection to non-physical planes. They are expressions of astral energy, of unseen forces intersecting with the systems we create, mediated, yes, by the complexity of the human biofield. But this forces us to challenge the idea that reality is confined to the material and urges us to consider the powerful, unseen role of consciousness and energy in shaping our world. The phenomena are, above all, evidence of the boundaries between planes constantly blurring.
Well, both perspectives require us to fundamentally reconsider the nature of reality and the source of chaos, whether we locate that source within the vast, complex internal mechanisms of life or in unseen layers of dimension.
Indeed. They both use powerful evidence from computational biology, theoretical physics, and spiritual philosophy to interpret these anomalies. Understanding disturbance seems to demand a framework that can accommodate both the rigorous evidence for internal systemic processes and the persistent historical evidence for external non-material influences.